Hey everybody, welcome to the Wickline Show News Edition. And we're going to catch you up on all the news that happened since the last show and get you ready for the week. And then we'll be back on Thursday for the big show. So we're going to kick it off with, we got a lot of James Gunn news today. James is in the news a lot, but we're going to break it up. We're going to do a story about James. We'll do a story about somebody else, mix it up a bit. But today, like many directors, James Gunn likes to hire actors he's worked with in the past. And one of the ones he's worked with probably the most is his brother Sean Gunn. Both were part of the MCU, with Sean doing the on-screen bodywork for Rocket Raccoon and playing the Ravager Kraglin in James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. And the pair moved on to DC to do the Suicide Squad, where Sean played the part of Weasel. With James and Peter Safran taking over DC Studios, it was announced that one of the early projects would be an animated series based on the Creature Commandos and that Weasel would be part of it, which meant Sean had more work. Now, it was later announced that he would also do the voicing for G.I. Robot in the series, and James has said that anybody who does the voice acting in an animated movie tied to his universe would also do the live action. So if there's a GI Robot suddenly in live action, James or Sean will at least do the voice, so okay. But we now have a new report from Deadline that Sean Gunn is going to be cast as Maxwell Lord. Now, Lord is an interesting history in comics and live action, having once been the main man funding the version of the Justice League that had like Booster Gold and Blue Beetle and Batman punching Guy Gardner in the face, the Wahaha version. He was later kind of retconned to be a powerful psychic who ends up killing the Ted Kord Blue Beetle. Now, he's appeared in live action a few times on the television series Supergirl, that when it was on CBS for that first season, he was brought in to play Maxwell Lord as kind of the Lex Luthor type, and he was played by Peter Fasinelli. And then later, we got to see Max Lord again in Wonder Woman 1984, played by Pedro Pascal. Now, Lord isn't normally played as an outright mustache-twirling villain, but rather as someone more complicated, and that appears to be what James is thinking, as he did comment on this story and the idea of Lord being called a bad guy by saying, "Calling Max a villain is a bit reductionist as far as I'm concerned. What do you say, J.M. DeMatteis?" And for his part, J.M. DeMatteis, who is one of the creators of the character in that era of the Justice League, described Maxwell Lord as flawed and in early stories manipulated by sentient AI, a bit of a con man, and in the end, Max has a heart of gold and loves his team. But I'm sure you know that, he says back to James Gunn. So Sean Gunn looks like he's going to be getting a lot of work thanks to his older brother. By the way, James Gunn has multiple acting brothers. So the fact that Sean is the only one that gets work kind of says something. I don't know what it says, but it says something. All right, let's move on to a non-James Gunn story. Peacock has renewed the action comedy series Twisted Metal for a second season. Series star and executive producer Anthony Mackie made the announcement Thursday during the Game Awards at the Peacock Theater in Los Angeles. Now, the series was nominated for Best Adaptation based on the classic PlayStation franchise. And season one follows this motor-mouthed outsider, which is Mackie, who is offered a chance at a better life, but only if he can successfully deliver a mysterious package across a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Now, with the help of a badass axe-wielding car thief played by Stephanie Beatrice, he'll face savage marauders driving vehicles of destruction and other dangers on the open road, including a deranged clown who drives an all-too-familiar ice cream truck. Now, Twisted Metal is currently streaming on Peacock, so if this is something that interests you, go check it out. All right, we're going to move on to some sad news in the comic world. Illustrator, writer, editor, and art director Derek Gross passed away over the weekend at the age of 76. Now, Gross won the Russ Manning Award for Most Promising Newcomer back in 1991 and worked for various publishers over the years, including Marvel, DC, Innovation, Image, Malibu, and Heroic, among many others. In 1988, he created a Latina mutant character named Murcielaga the She-Bat, which was published by Heroic in the early 1990s. From there, he painted the interiors for Innovation's 12-issue adaptation of Anne Rice's Vampire Lestat. And in the mid-90s, he worked for Marvel on books like Excalibur, Spider-Man, X-Force, Cable, and Domino. And for DC, he worked on the first 2 issues of Batman Two-Face Strikes Twice. In his later years, he would turn to producing t-shirts and prints of his work on them and even dabbled in political cartoons. His passing was announced on Facebook by his family. All right, we're going to roll back to some more James Gunn news here. When Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 came out, it included graphic depictions of animal cruelty that was met with some fierce opposition online, but it also received strong support from various groups, including PETA. Now the group has made director James Gunn their 2023 Person of the Year, referring to the film as simply marvelous and applauding it, saying, for using impressive and stunningly well-crafted CGI animals to inspire tens of millions of moviegoers who flock to the theaters to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, to have compassion for the millions of animals killed by experimentators and in laboratories. So, PETA actually thought that Guardians 3 would help drive home the point that animals shouldn't be experimented on. I got to agree with them. So, all right, we're going to move on to, with the successful completion of Loki Season 2, many fans are wondering about a third season and what that would entail with the ending we got, because it felt very definitive. But TV Line actually asked the question of Loki producer Kevin Wright, who would very much like to continue working with the group from the series. He doesn't want just to rush into a third season, though, saying, for 2 seasons, I've loved working with this team. I would love to keep telling these stories with them in this world. I don't think any of us would ever want to rush into a season 3 if there's not a good story to tell. But I think this team could go off and tell other stories. Maybe if not Loki season 3, maybe there's something we can do to continue the TVA, and it's like our Better Call Saul to Loki's Breaking Bad. That would be cool to me. That isn't because we want to end the story, but it forces all filmmakers involved to bring their best. If this is the only opportunity we get to work together to build something, let's make this as fulfilling as possible. And if there's more to tell down the road, we can do it. So, if you are a Doctor Who fan and have been following along with the different 60th anniversary specials, the third and final special aired the other night. Now, there is a Christmas special, but that's kind of separate. But the third special changed the character of Doctor Who significantly by changing the way Doctor regenerated. The final episode of Jodie Whittaker's run at the time was unique because when she regenerated, she went back into being David Tennant. So this was kind of special. And we knew this was coming because it was going to be for these 3 specials. And then they were going to move on to Ncuti Gatwa. But the way they did it was very interesting. Because instead of the regeneration process, they did something called bigeneration. And this literally split them into 2 actors, leaving both the 14th Doctor, and this is what they're referring to this version of David Tennant's Doctor as, instead of the 10th, he is a unique version of Doctor Who from the 10th Doctor, and the new 15th Doctor standing side by side with each other. Now, this would allow the franchise to tell stories with either Doctor moving forward, because they don't wrap it up at the end and suddenly have one of them go away like they normally do. This actually leaves two Doctor Who's active in the universe. Now, this also, and this is more speculation or anything, but if you go back to the 50th anniversary special, there was an appearance by Tom Baker in a character called the Curator. And it was a small role, but it was very interesting. And he had interaction with the 11th Doctor. And in it, these were the dialogue lines. The 11th Doctor said, I could be a curator. I'd be a great curator. I'd be the great curator. I could retire and do that. I could retire and be the curator of this place. And of course, he's sitting in an art museum. And at that point, from off camera, you hear, I really think you might. And that's when 11 turns and sees Tom Baker and really looks at his face and goes, I never forget a face. And the curator says, I know you don't. And in the years to come, you might find yourself revisiting a few, but just the old favorites, eh? Now, could this bi-generation, leaving a second Doctor in retirement, be a way for them to do some special stories that would include revisiting some of the Doctors? There's been a rumor about a Paul McGann story coming, with him returning to be the Doctor in live action. They could do stuff with Christopher Eccleston or Peter Capaldi, Matt Smith. They could do these little one-off specials without changing the main storyline. They still have Judy Gatwa going over here. And then lead into him finally becoming the curator. I think that's a neat storyline, and I'm kind of curious if that's what they did. So that's not really news. That's me more speculating, but what the hell, right? All right, let's look at the weekend box office. And this looked a little soft if you looked at first glance, because nobody made a huge amount of money, but it did take in $72 million domestically, which is only a 7% drop from the same time last year. So not great, but not as bad as people might have thought. But the film at the top of the box office actually has quite a lot to be happy about. Studio Ghibli's The Boy and the Heron posted a $12.8 million weekend, an opening. This is the studio's and animated filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki. This is their biggest opening ever in the US-Canadian marketplace. So they've got a lot to celebrate there. Now, bumping down to the second spot is the Hunger Games prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which took in about 9.4 million in its fourth weekend, while Toho's latest, Godzilla Minus One, grabbed 8.3 million in the second weekend. Then the top five was rounded out by two more animated films, Trolls Band Together, which grabbed 6.2 million in its fourth weekend, and Disney's Wish, which took in 5.3 million in its third weekend. And I find all this very interesting because this might be one of the first times we've had three animated movies taking in the top five of the box office, with a fourth movie being an import. So that's pretty huge. And the fact is that Trolls Band Together is tracking at higher, like $33 million higher than Wish. So the Troll movie is outdoing Disney's Wish. Do a quick update on the Jonathan Majors trial. This one has been going on a week. Friday there were some text messages that had been originally sealed that came to light because the defense attorney accidentally kind of opened that door. The judge unsealed them. And in those text messages, we learned that Grace Jabari had an incident where she received a head injury. This was over in England. She wanted to go to the hospital. Majors sent messages telling her that he feared what would happen if she went, that there would be an investigation. Um, and he basically tried to talk her out of going to the hospital, and even at one point started referring to himself as a bad person and saying that he should kill himself, and was threatening suicide. They were not very good texts for Majors to have released. It definitely feeds the narrative that the prosecution's been building, that Majors was being manipulative and controlling. Flip that over to today. Today's testimony included that of the driver of the car from the night in March that this whole case is about. Now, this driver doesn't speak English, is not their first language. They had an interpreter. But while answering questions, the interpreter made it clear that Jabari was the instigator, and said that she's the one that was hitting Majors, not the other way around. They never saw Majors hit Jabari. And that she was the aggressor. So that Majors tried to end it, tried to get her out of the car, that he wasn't being physical, then they also had two other witnesses that they met on the street shortly after, who kind of took Jabari in because she had jumped out of the car. She said she didn't have her phone or her license or anything, and they kind of took pity on her, but took her to a nightclub with them, which is where she was hanging out and partying a little bit. Both of them testified, though, that they did not see, nor did Jabari ever mention of any injuries. So while Friday's text messages were very damning, these messages kind of feed into these testimonies today feed more into Major's story. Now, it looks like it may come down to the case really being whether the jury allows past events to weigh in on the decision or not. We'll have to see how this plays out. It's expected that this will run through this week and likely go to the jury early next week. So we could end up with a verdict before Christmas. All right, we got a little bit more news. We're going to jump back to a James Gunn story. James has finally come out and confirmed that Nicholas Hoult will be playing Lex Luthor. He put up a post with the two of them together in front of images of Superman behind them. And James writes, "Yes, finally I can answer. Nicholas Hoult is Lex Luthor in Superman Legacy, and I couldn't be happier. We went out to dinner last night to celebrate and discuss how we can create a Lex that will be different from anything you've seen before and will never forget." But James, we heard this weeks ago. Why didn't you tell us it was true? And he says, because although we were discussing it, it wasn't final until a couple days ago, and I don't want to tell you something that isn't certain. So just because these stories are being, covered by Deadline and stuff like Sean Gunn playing Lex Luthor, there's a chance that they're not done yet. They're being worked on. They're trying to be finalized. So until you actually get it from the studio, it might be worth just still taking it with a grain of salt. And in that vein, Gunn also squashed a rumor. Gunn squashed the rumor that Kurt Russell would be playing Jor-El in the upcoming Superman Legacy. What Gunn wrote was, "I love working and directing Kurt. Hilarious and fun and talented guy. But no, this was never discussed." So, yes to Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. No, the rumors of Kurt Russell being Jor-El are not true. So that wraps up the news for today. Remember, stick around later today. Will be Minute to Skim It, and I will be back on Thursday for the big show where we will talk about Maxwell Lord and more about the Curator. I will see you then. Have a good day.